Welcome to tonight's webinar on engaging women in Simchat Torah in your community, hosted by JOFA. My name is Sari Steinberg. I'm very excited to be moderating this panel, and we have some amazing panelists whom I'll introduce very briefly in a moment. It's amazing to have technology that can bring us all together, even though we're all over the country. And I know JOFA is expanding its programming in various places, including Chicago, where I am. So I'm really excited and happy to be part of it. In a moment, you'll be hearing about options for having a meaningful Simchat Torah experience on both sides of the Mechitza for really any of a whole range of modern Orthodox synagogues where women may or may not have access or interest in laning and aliyot. There are many other ways to engage too, and our panelists are really amazing. I've already talked to them, and I can assure you that there are some amazing ideas out there that can really change your Simchat Torah this year and in years to come. We have Aliza Abrams Konig, who is the Director of Student Life and Jewish Service Learning at Stern College for Women, and she has sent over 3,000 students on the Schreiber Torah Tours, a program that enhances programming for Simchat Torah and Shavuot at synagogues across North America. We have Toby Goldfisher Kaplowitz, who is a teacher and Judaic Studies curriculum coordinator for the lower school of Beth Tfiloh Dahan Community School in Baltimore, and was the co-director of the OU's JLIC at Brandeis University for 6 years. And last but not least, we have Rabbi Starr, who is the rabbi of Young Israel of Toco Hills in Atlanta, Georgia. I also want to introduce and thank Rachel Lieberman, JOFA's assistant director, who is running tech behind the scenes. So she will be dealing with any technical problems we have. You'll see that there's a place for Q&A, and we will try to address the questions that you have after each of the panelists speaks for 5 to 10 minutes. And also, if you have technical problems, put those in the Q&A, and Rachel will deal with them. As you probably know, the webinar is being recorded, so you should be able to view it later if you want to review it or share it with anybody else. So thank you all for being here, and without further ado, let's get started with our panelists. Toby, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Thanks so much for inviting me to speak. So you mentioned earlier that I worked at Brandeis for 6 years with my husband. We were the co-directors of JLIC at Brandeis University. It's a national program, about on 20 campuses around the country, and it was really a fantastic experience in many ways. But Simchat Torah, you could probably imagine at Brandeis, was a very unique and interesting experience with so many Jewish students there. It has a very, very large Jewish student body, lots and lots of options going on for students there. When we were there, the Reform student group didn't really have anything formal planned for Simchat Torah, so they would sort of join up with any other group that they wanted to. The conservative group would have davening and hakafot, and the Orthodox group, where my husband and I were sort of advising, had traditional Orthodox davening and hakafot. It was really nice that at certain points the entire community would come together for hakafot and dancing and singing, and it was an amazing evening. But something that we saw after the first year there was there wasn't really anything formal going on for women's involvement, specifically in the Orthodox minyan. Many of the Orthodox students, the women students, would want to get aliyot, so they would go to the conservative minyan to get aliyot, would come back for hakafot. But I kind of felt like that was really lacking. But as advisors to these students, we really took their lead in a lot of ways, and there wasn't much interest, strong interest, in having women's aliyot on Simchat Torah. Women did dance with the Torah, and we had women's hakafot, and women would lead the songs, but there weren't women's aliyot. So an idea that I thought of and that we ended up implementing was to have sort of a Dvar Torah marathon, kind of for lack of a better title, where a few weeks before Simchat Torah, I asked a few students who were pretty involved, and I pitched the idea to them, and I said, well, if we break up the Torah by Parsha, and we assign a Parsha to a different person, and every person gives a 30-second Dvar Torah, literally 30 seconds. We're going to cut them off. We don't have a lot of time. Just 30 seconds to get up and give a quick idea about that Parsha. We essentially could finish, sort of learning the entire Torah by the time the men were done getting their aliyot. So the students liked the idea. The first year we did it, it took a while to kind of get women, 50 some odd women, to sign up, because a lot of them had never given a Dvar Torah, or were nervous and felt a little intimidated, or were thinking, how can I do that in 30 seconds? And we managed to get the group together, and within this huge ballroom where we had the Orthodox minyan on Simchat Torah on Hakafot, the men would sort of go to one side for the aliyot, and the women, we kind of went to the other side. We set up lots and lots of rows of chairs, and they were very organized. They had their lists with the names according to each parsha, got their groups together, and I gave a quick introduction onto what we're going to do, and quickly, one by one, they came up in front of the group, gave a quick little idea. Some things were a quick little story, a little joke, an insight, just one pasuk that they wanted to share, because literally it was 30 seconds. And then the next person would come, and the next person, and the next person. And by the end, as the men were finishing their aliyot, they kind of were coming over to listen. And by the end, the entire community was sitting together listening to these amazing Divrei Torah. And it was a really, really moving and inspirational experience. A lot of women who gave the Dvar Torah were not part of the Orthodox minyan, came over from other minyanim, or just really didn't go to minyan at all. But this was their first experience in celebrating Simchat Torah. And it really brought the community together. After that first year, it wasn't very hard to get people to sign up. In fact, a lot of the guys wanted to sign up, and they felt excluded from that, and which was kind of interesting. But we said, you're more than welcome to join and listen, but we're going to save this, for the women. This is something special. And it was really a highlight of the semester, of the Chagim time on campus, and it was a really, really exciting thing. And we haven't been there now for 2 years, and I think they're still doing it. The program is still going. We've shared it with other campuses. I know other campuses have taken the idea and used it on their campus, which is great. I think it's a very replicable idea. I don't think it has to be on a college campus. This can happen in a community. It can happen with children. If you want to get children involved in your, Simchat Torah celebrations in shul, this is a very easy way to do it. It really can be a powerful experience for a parent to prepare something with their child, give the child confidence to get up for 30 seconds and share something. It can be done in place of hakafot. If some people just aren't into that dancing and aren't into that, you can extend the time. It doesn't have to be 30 seconds. It could be a minute. It really is just a very sort of simple idea, but could really bring a lot of people together. Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. I want to continue now with Aliza. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences and ideas?
Sure. Thank you so much also for the opportunity. So I was introduced as a person who's been running the Aaron and Blanche Schreiber Torah Tourist program for the last 10 years. In fact, this week I just ran my 21st training. Every year before the program, we have a big training with all the students, and it's really fun. And I realized it was the 21st time that I had given that talk, so that was pretty exciting for me all to happen in this week. So when I was reflecting and preparing for this program, I realized that I've heard a lot of ideas from my students who have gone out to different communities on behalf of Yeshiva University, and I myself have been a part of Torah Tours when I was a student, and also different programs that I've instituted in my own community here in New York. And a bunch of different ideas that I was thinking about. One is similar to something that Toby just shared about having special learning for women during the time of, I think, either during Hakavot or even during laning when everyone is reading Sefer Bereshit, and if you're in a community where women are not particularly engaged during that time, it's a great opportunity to have special programming for women. But there's two things that I want to say before going into the special programming. Number one, I think that this programming should be run by women, for women. I think that there should be committees in each shul that run Simchat Torah. I think it's a unique holiday that is very marginalizing at times, and people need to be engaged in the right way. And if women are the ones who are most affected by it not being a women's holiday, then they can be most influential in creating the programming. I also think that young girls have the opportunity to learn at this point what Simchat Torah can mean to them and what it can mean to them as future older women. So one of the ideas that I thought about was doing a mother-daughter learning during this time, or even something else that could happen is leading up to Simchat Torah. You could have learning, mother-daughter learning or family learning over Sukkot. Most families are around. And you could have a big siyum during Hakafot or during the laning or at some point over Simchat Torah to celebrate all the learning that those women and young girls had done. Another thing that I was thinking about was that there can also be an opportunity for women to express themselves in different ways. There could be a kumsitz for women. Everyone, could just sit and join together in song and story. Some people are intimidated to give divrei Torah or give shiurim, so let it be something that they connect to differently, like a kumsitz. Some other ideas are, I'm just looking at my notes, I'm sorry, is the fact that we are completing, that we begin Sefer Bereshit again, the book of Genesis, now on Simchat Torah. Something interesting that I was thinking about is the Hakafot. We typically do 7 Hakafot. We go around 7 times. Perhaps each Hakafa could begin or end with a Dvar Torah by a woman in the community. Or each Hakafa could be dedicated to a different day of creation and someone shares something about that. Or the kids do a program learning about Sefer Bereshit and they put up a display, and then during the laning time, during Hakafot, that's an opportunity for people to go and look at it, not to take away from the Hakafot, but to have another alternative of programming. In addition, another idea was to make sure that if women are, every shul is a little bit different, and I've noticed that in some shuls, women are given the Torah to dance with, and some shuls, women do not have the Torah to dance with. So one time I was in a community where I saw, and it was a shul that they did not give the women a Torah, but instead they put on a beautiful tablecloth in the middle of the women's dancing circle, they laid down 2 Sifrei Torah. So it wasn't people dancing with Torahs, but it made the women feel a little bit more engaged, that at least Torahs were brought over to their side of the dance floor and they were a little bit more engaged than if it was just the men dancing with the Torahs. And then just to enhance Simchat Torah in general, I find that, the day, especially the daytime Hakafot are like maybe the worst sometimes. It's very hard. You already had it at night, now you're recreating that same experience. And something that I've seen done, or 1 or 2, and obviously it depends on the weather, is after Hakafot and shul is over, the whole community joins together for a barbecue. Because if it's not Shabbos, you can cook on Yom Tov. You can cook on the holiday, you can make a barbecue. And it's just like another fun way to sort of switch up things that happen on Simchat Torah. It's not just about the dancing and those kind of activities. Another idea that I've seen is also when sometimes the shul isn't super conducive to the dancing. If you have a sanctuary that has stationary chairs, or you have a sanctuary where the women are upstairs and the men are downstairs with a balcony, it makes it really hard to dance. I think it's okay to leave the sanctuary. Bring the dancing to the social hall. Bring the dancing to a main area that everyone can be on even playing grounds, or dancing grounds, I guess. But it's really important to just make sure that the same experiences have, members of the community. And I think that people should feel empowered to change the way that Simchat Torah has typically looked. I know that I remember growing up, and it was very much the same from year to year. You know, the little girls and little boys got to go on the daddy's shoulders, and they got flags, and that was Simchat Torah, the women watching from the side. I think it's really changed over the years, and I think it has to keep changing. And I think that there's probably a lot of different activities and ideas that people haven't necessarily brought to the forefront because no one's necessarily asked them to take a lead on it. That's one of the things I've really learned from Simchat Torah is you have to take the lead. If you want to change the way that it looks in your community, it's time to step up and volunteer to be that person who's going to modify the hakafot or modify the women's programming. Unfortunately, you just can't expect someone to ask you to join them. You have to take the lead on that. And I think that the last thing I want to share is that we happen to create we call little cheat sheets, little song cards that we give out to our students when they go away for Simchat Torah. And it's a list of about 35 songs. And why it's a great tool because regardless of where you are standing on the mechitza, I can yell to my team member, we're going to start song 13. And then together, everyone knows what song 13 is. The more that you prepare for the hakafot and for the singing, everyone could be on the same page and people can be more engaged. So it might be that the men start the singing, but the women can choose the song, or vice versa. But if people know what song you're about to go into, it'll help the whole singing process and make it that much more fun and engaging for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So many ideas, and great how you're able to really affect communities all over the country. Last but not least, Rabbi Adam Starr with the pulpit rabbi's perspective, which I think is pretty important and unique here. So if you'll take over now and talk about things that have been implemented in your community and maybe the process even of implementing change.
Thanks so much. It's a real pleasure to be part of this. So I want to just discuss specifically how a particular program involving women in Simchat Torah evolved. So we already had women dancing with the Sefer Torah, and the big challenge, as it is with most shuls, was the time during the men when they were getting the aliyot. So you have that time, which can be probably about 45 minutes when the men are getting aliyot, and what is there for the women to do during that time? So my first few years here, we established a shiur, and women gave divrei Torah, but there were many women that were looking for something more, and looking for a more powerful experience that was more, that felt really Simchat Torah-like. And I remember very clearly, I met with a group of women, probably 15, 20, and we were discussing ways in general that they were looking for more involvement in our shul. And one of the major areas was Simchat Torah. And we discussed the idea of having some form of Torah reading during when the men were getting aliyot. And it was actually a great experience because for me as a rabbi, sitting with congregants, sitting with people that want to come closer to Torah in a very respectful dialogue, each hearing one another, to do ultimately what we felt was best for our particular congregation. What's right for one shul is not necessarily right for another shul. And we went through this dialogue, and working together with these women, we came up with an idea that both they were comfortable with and I was comfortable with, which was actually, instead of merely doing the same model of what the men are doing, of having multiple aliyot going on. I wanted to frame it a little bit differently, and to frame it as what I called Torah and Tfiloh, women's Torah and Tfiloh, that the essence of this was an opportunity to engage further and more deeply in Torah. So what we planned was that women would read, a different woman would read each aliyah. So as we know in the Zot HaBracha, there are the 5 aliyot that we keep repeating. And before each of the readings that we started with Zot HaBracha, there would be a Dvar Torah given by a woman about what is being read. Now this was an amazing opportunity because there were few women in my community who knew how to read Torah, who knew how to learn, but most did not. So this became an educational Torah learning opportunity, where one of the women in my congregation opened up a class, and for those women that wanted to learn how to lane, the skill of learning how to lane, with the opportunity after they learn, they specifically focusing on one of the aliyot of the Zot HaBracha, so they'd be able to read. So this was an amazing thing. You had many people show up for this class, and what was most amazing to me, you had people, newly bat mitzvah girls, and you also had women in their 70s. You had the range of women coming. Many of these women had never seen the inside of a Sefer Torah before in their life, which for me is mind-boggling in and of itself. And this was what was planned. And as with change, there was some controversy, but overall there was strong support. And I can just tell you that Simchat Torah day was one of the highlights of my rabbinate, because you saw the joy and the celebration of these women embracing the Torah, who worked hard at it. They worked hard to learn a skill that they did not know. And so I think they did 2 rounds, so 10 women approximately. A few knew it before, but most learned it at that time. They read the Torah, many of them for the very first time. And it was, so all the women came to a separate, we were in a smaller shul then, we actually had to go to a building adjacent, but all the women came, and actually I still remember to this day, you seeing the women dance with that Torah to the place where they will be reading it in their own space. And what was amazing is that many of their friends, the women's friends, who from the more right-wing shul, came over to support these women. And the feeling that I was not there, but what I heard was this most unbelievable, meaningful experience of deeply, profoundly connecting to Torah in a very substantive way. And now we're getting ready to do this for the 4th time. And it is one of the most special moments for these women in the year. And it's distinct from the way the men do it. From what I understand, what they described to me, it's much more meaningful than all the men running all over here to just quickly get their aliyah. But because all the women, they're doing it together. They're supporting one another. At the end, they sing together. It's a very spiritually uplifting moment for them. And I'm so honored that this happens in my shul. I get inspired that this is happening for them. So one other thing, we do a barbecue, and it's a great idea.
The barbecue is like the reverse of Shavuot, right? We're gonna all go into the meat.
One less meal to cook. That's the big thing. After all that yantif.
Yeah, and the timing is so tricky also on Simchat Torah morning. Thank you, all 3 of you. Now we have some questions, and please, participants, keep sending the questions because Rachel is feeding them to me. There are 2 related questions I'm going to combine regarding getting buy-in. One person was asking about the reticence of women to get up and dance. How do you get them to get up and dance? And another question is, how do you get the younger girls to buy in, the perhaps teenagers who are maybe too cool? How do you get people motivated to actually get up and dance or to buy into the programs that you institute? Does anybody want to take that?
I'll jump in. One is you can bring Torah to our shul. But no, in reality, I think one of the things is that people need to be given responsibility. It's like what I mentioned before, like take ownership and volunteer to lead something or change something. I think that if someone went up to the high school girls and said, you guys are in charge of this hakafa, you could do funky dancing, or you could choose the song, or you can do this, that would maybe be an opportunity, and it would be fun for them. And I think that would actually draw in their moms, who would want to chef a little bit of nachas and watch them and be proud of them. I think that also hakafot should be made shorter. If people aren't engaged in hakafot, they don't have to go on for hours. Do one song per hakafa, or do a short song per hakafa, or do just a niggin, so that way people don't feel like they don't know the words, and maybe it'll be more enjoyable because they can nine with the rest of them. But I think that that's probably one of the, you want to leave them always wanting more. So I would say shorten hakafot, put people in charge of them, and make them dance captains. Make up something. I don't mean that in like a kitschy way, but tell people they're responsible. They have to bring in 3 friends with them to the circle, and that would perhaps bring more people in.
Nice. Thank you. Does anyone else want to jump in, or should I bring the next question? Should I go with the next question? Okay. What about, well, here's a question that we're going to answer ourselves. One of the participants asked if there's any prohibition for women to touch a Sefer Torah, and there's actually a wonderful Tashma publication published by JOFA. You can find it on the website. Devorah Zlatchower quotes primary sources and explains the issue, and P.S. the answer is no, but you can see all the reasoning behind it and present the talking points to other people who may be discussing it in your community. So I recommend looking there. Let's see. So another question that was asked is, what does it look like the first year that there's a change? And actually, Rabbi Adam, when we talked separately, you were talking about kind of the process of change, and then any of you might talk about how the first year of change really goes.
So I guess I'll jump in. So the first year was the most difficult. Now it's a given, and I make it very clear that this opportunity is there, but it doesn't mean that it's for everybody. I have a diverse shul, and there are women that are not interested in this, and they're fully respected to listen from the side to the men's reading. And there are women that are very interested. What I did ask my congregation is for each side to respect the other. For those that are not interested, recognize that there are women that this is really, really important to. And for those women that are really interested, recognize that this is not necessarily of interest to all women, that also needs to be respected. And I think having that mutual respect for different needs within a congregation can go a long way. And it's really, sometimes change is hardest to get over that hump. And now it's just a part of what Simchat Torah is here at our shul.
Thank you. Thank you. Aliza, have you heard from your students that there's a lot of pushback when they try to introduce something new?
I don't think that because they're the guests, they typically don't have that experience, that there's pushback. I think it's sometimes when they come back with the feedback of, oh, I was surprised that happened or that didn't happen, is kind of the experience. But we actually encourage them, that I say to them, you're going to walk into a shul that may have a mechitza higher than you're used to, or mechitza lower than you're used to, or they dance differently than you're used to, etc. And I just encourage them to have thoughtful conversations with the rabbi of the community or the other community leaders to understand, well, where did this come from? Where did it start? And I think that's also a really great way to understand why these changes are made, or maybe changes need to be made, is to let's have a Simchat Torah conversation. It shouldn't just be, okay, we pull out the Torahs and we dance, right? It should be a thoughtful experience and process and planning.
Sorry, I'm cheating looking at the questions at the same time. One person asks, how can the women be doing something else during Kriyat Torah? Don't they feel obligated to hear the Torah just as the men are obligated?
So I guess I'll chime in with that one. So at Brandeis, we would start right away. I mean, they're reading it so many times that they would wait to read it the last time until we were all finished. Mm-hmm. So that way everyone could come back together and hear the last reading. It was just a pretty simple, easy way to get around that.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do, the way we time it, that the women's reading is going on the exact same time as the aliyot for the men, and Kol HaNa'arim through Chatan Torah, which is finishing the Torah, and Chatan Bereshit, and the beginning the Bereshit, the whole shul is there together. So they're really hearing all of Kriyat Torah.
Great.
I'm sorry. I want to just jump in and say, actually, in my shul, if I'm remembering this correctly, because it is from year to year, they actually offer a shir. It's open to everybody, meaning so men stop in after the mechitza. That happens in the main sanctuary, and that the aliyot happen in smaller sections, so that way, again, people feel more inclusive and not exclusive. And I think that they do one final reading immediately following the shiur, so everybody's in the room together for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Awesome. We're getting other questions about, well, one question is about creating programs for men and women together. Has anybody thought about that, considered it, done it? Anybody? Or is that just not something that's been done?
I think everything that probably has been suggested could be done co-ed. I mean, it's more just that it's a scheduling decision. You know, do you start with aliyot and then have a program, or figure out how to do the aliyot and a program for everyone? Mm-hmm. I think it's a scheduling thing. Mm-hmm.
And Toby, you had mentioned that there were men who wanted to join in, but all they can do is really listen because it's the women's domain.
Yeah, you know, it was interesting because I never would have thought that would have been the reaction, but it was genuine. It was really genuine from a lot of students, that men who really felt like it was such a powerful experience to finish, you know, learning the Torah together as a community. They wanted to be a part of that, and they said, well, why can't I do that too? And we felt like this was, again, because the nature of the minyan at that time was they weren't comfortable, I guess, as a community having women's aliyot. I felt like, well, this was something special for women, and you can come and listen and participate in that way and encourage your friends and learn with women beforehand to prepare their Dvar Torah. But I agree. I think this could easily, you know, if you're in a community where you want to do something like that, it could easily happen, but it's long. It's a long day in shul, and like people want to go home at a certain point, and, you know, be with their family and not be in shul. So I guess it would depend on, you know, what your community is like, if they'd like to stay longer.
Thank you. Another question that came in is about, it actually is to Rabbi Starr, or regarding your program, saying, what about a community that doesn't have enough Sifrei Torah, that has a limited number of Sifrei Torah? How do you implement that then?
That is certainly a challenge. I mean, I would say most communities have more than one Sefer Torah. And I think if we're going to take this seriously and think it's a value, then one of the Sifrei Torah should go, assuming there's more than one of the Sifrei Torah should go to the women, and it might take a little longer for the men to get the aliyot, but so be it. This is a value, and if this is a value of that particular community, then we all need to make space, and it'll take a little longer. But if there's only one, most shuls have more than one Sefer Torah.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to get caught in that.
Okay, that might be related to another question that was, how is the situation different in colleges or seminaries? Maybe they only have one Sefer Torah. I don't know. But how, maybe this is one for Toby. How do you think it's different being in a community versus being in a university or a seminary context?
Are you saying just in general on Simchat Torah?
I think so. That the question was, how is the situation different? So.
Oh, okay. So it's very different. In some ways, it's very different because students are much more. This is a very big generalization, but I think students at that point in their life, they're really exploring. They're open to different things. They're really interested in learning and knowing and sort of exploring for themselves what they want to do and what they feel comfortable with. So you were mentioning before the Tashma publication. You have used that specific publication to teach before Simchat Torah about women touching a Sefer Torah, because at Brandeis, women dance with the Torah, and lots of students, this is their first experience with that. So to learn about it and to engage in it, shuls are different. You know, it really would depend on the shul. The shul that we go to now, my husband happens to be the rabbi of it. It's a very engaged and I guess people are very thoughtful about what they do and want to learn and want to know. But I think in general it's really fun. Simchat Torah on a college campus is like really, really fun. But it would depend on the community.
A lot of youthful energy.
Yeah.
And interest, curiosity,
yeah.
openness. Another question is actually on the opposite end of the spectrum, the community side of things. Somebody asks about childcare or children's programming during Hakafot, because she says, or he says, I don't know if it's a male or female, that often that's the biggest barrier to people coming and participating fully, as far as parents.
Right. So my view on this is this is a time for parents actually to be with their children. Where sitting through shul is very difficult for children, and there needs to be childcare in groups. For Simchat Torah, that's hold your kid, grab your kid, put them on your shoulders, or take them up to see the Torah with you. It's so hands-on. I think we're doing a disservice to our children if we put them in a group away from Simchat Torah. And I think and one of the things I try to do, especially in the beginning of the dancing, is I tell the adults to make room for the kids. Mm-hmm. More than anything, we want to instill the joy of Jewish life and Torah to our children. That's first and foremost in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Great. Anybody else want to jump in, or should we move on? Aliza, Toby?
I fully agree with what Rabbi Starr just said. As a parent, I mean, even on a college campus with my kids, and there were hardly any kids. There was an amazing Chabad family there with their few kids, and that was basically it. And I have amazing memories of dancing with my children, but my children remember just staying up really late, dancing, having fun, just totally being free, and that they were able to touch the Torah, to kiss the Torah, to dance. It's just a very powerful experience that, you know, we want to share with our children.
Yeah. Great. Great. We have a question, besides whether or not women are permitted to touch a Sefer Torah, what about those who are simply afraid to, if they're afraid that they're going to drop it or something like that? I think, Aliza, you mentioned the shul where the Sefer Torah were sitting on a table in the middle. That seems like one possibility. Or do you have other ideas?
I didn't hear the whole question. I'm sorry.
Sorry, women who may just not be used to holding a Sefer Torah and be afraid that they're going to drop it. How would you address that?
I think that there's probably I think the table thing is a nice option. And I think that if people, I've seen in shuls, they have little smaller Torahs. So maybe if they could reserve the smaller ones for the women, that would be more ideal as opposed to giving them the very, very heavy ones. Yeah, I have a very funny story that I'll tell very shortly. I was leading a trip, and we kept our Sefer Torah in like a duffel bag wrapped up very nicely, and the bellhop was very generously giving us all of our luggage and just chucking it over, and he almost lunged the Torah, and I remember grabbing it and thinking, this is way heavier than I was anticipating it. So actually prepare yourself for that, I think. If you're going to grab Torah, know how heavy it is, so you don't, God forbid, drop it.
Right. Yeah. I guess with time people will be more familiar with it. Oh, here's a question that's coming in. Simchat Torah is a couple of weeks away. What can we do this year? Any suggestions of things that can be implemented this year?
So something that we're doing in our shul, just an idea, we're talking about engaging children. And this is, we have never done this before, so I'm not sure how it's going to go, but we were thinking, my husband and I were thinking about, you know, making it meaningful for children, dancing and singing and all of that, but to give a Dvar Torah, what would that look like if the children would sort of have the opportunity to share their ideas on Simchat Torah? So my husband made this form for parents to just fill out about their kid, their age, their interests, if their child was interested in doing this. And it's really for any age, you know, very young children up through, you know, young teenagers, and give them the opportunity to speak. And it doesn't have to be from the pulpit. In our shul, it could happen. People are comfortable with that. But if you're in a shul that is not, maybe at Kiddush, maybe during Hakafot, maybe after, and helping the children prepare the Dvar Torah. So giving them the opportunity to learn a little bit before, how do you kind of put an idea together, and then being able to share it could be a really powerful experience. So that hasn't even really started yet, and I think it's not too late to do that. That's just one idea.
I love how that works for any age, because really everybody who's listening will understand this is a 6-year-old or this is a 12-year-old, and clearly at each at his or her own level.
Right.
I think sorry, are you done, Toby? I think another idea is, I don't know if many people even know what Simchat Torah is. Like, in school, you learn a lot about Sukkot, and you make your lulav, and you make your etrog, and you do the first part of the holiday, but there isn't as much a focus on Simchat Torah and Shmini Atzeret, because it's sort of like the second part, and it's just like, I just think it's taken for granted. And I think it would be really interesting for shuls and educators and rabbis to maybe look through the minhagim of Simchat Torah. Where did this come from? Why do we have 7 hakafot? Why do we do the dancing? What are we celebrating? Why are we taking all the Torahs out? And have maybe a more experiential, explanatory Simchat Torah, so people actually understand, why are we doing this, and why are we out late, and why are we, you know, throwing candy at children at 10 o'clock at night? You know, all those reasons behind Simchat Torah.
I'll share with you something that we do, because there's usually a break time a little bit between Mincha and starting Simchat Torah on the afternoon. So every year I do Torah trivia. And the adults love it, and the kids love it, and I give out lollipops to the kids in shul. So here I come with a huge stash, and to get a right answer, I throw it, and it's just, it's a form of learning, but in a more Simchat Torah type atmosphere, where it's hard to get people to listen to a serious shir at that time. But the trivia it's really a lot of fun, and people really get into it, and it's a way to celebrate some Torah learning in an interesting way as we're preparing for the dancing. So you just need to come up with questions, or I can send you things I've done in the past if anybody's interested.
All great ideas. Aliza, I have a question about what you suggested. When do you think that learning could take place?
if a shul is interested, they could actually do some prep time, a Simchat Torah or a nighttime on Chol HaMoed. I think families are often struggling for activities when kids are home, so maybe it could be a party in the sukkah in their local shul and talk about Simchat Torah there. Or, as I was saying, if a shul would be open to making the hakafot a little bit more experiential, and instead of just doing the dancing, pause, explain why we're doing this. Okay, we're taking out the Torahs. This is what this is for. Now let's begin. We're going to do our first hakafa. Why? And I know it's hard to do some counseling for them, switching people. And I know Rabbi starts cracking up at me, but I've led big groups. But that's why I think maybe before. Or the other alternative is to put together a document and email it out to people before Simchat Torah, a little take-home reading that people can read in preparation for the holiday. Right. You won't know until you try, Rabbi Starr.
I just know getting people quiet on Simchat Torah is an impossible task. But you must be able to do it, so you're welcome to come here and try.
More questions are still coming in. One of them, I think, is also addressing something, it's a question that has been addressed partially by Aliza, so maybe you can continue from here. And it's something I've experienced in the shul I've been to probably most often lately. When the hakafot are going on in the men's side, and they have the Sifrei Torah, even if there's something going on the women's side, sometimes we feel marginalized because we can't even really see what's going on or hear what's going on. And, the shulchan's in the middle of the men's section so they can dance around it, but then that makes the women even farther out. So what might be done about that? Improving sightlines, improving hearing, improving the feeling of inclusivity.
I can give another crack at it. I mean, first of all, again, I think move it out to a more, a better space. I think space is a big contributor. I think that, again, if people can prepare, you know how there's like the flip chart number signs, you know what page someone is on in the Siddur? Well, maybe, if someone would take initiative, you could have one song per hakafa that you held up a big poster that said, we're singing now Mashiach, Mashiach, and now we're singing Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai, whatever song it is. And then everyone would sort of know to look up to that poster and that everyone's on the same page with that song. I'm an experiential educator and a very visual learner, so the more you can show people, I think the more successful it could be.
I think that's a great idea. That's to make sure everyone is literally on the same page. Sometimes it's really hard to know. I have a follow-up question, which actually is another participant's question, and I'm not sure. Maybe it should be a rabbinic answer. I don't know. But if you do move the hakafot out into the social hall, or as Toby described, into a beautiful banquet hall, do you need a mechitza for the laning and the dancing?
So I think you're going to get different answers from different rabbis, and I think you have to consult the rabbi of a person's particular shul. You're going to find rabbis who say yes, and you'll find rabbis who say no. That's.
So if it's 2 Jews, 3 opinions, is 2 rabbis, and how many?
Right. I mean, no different than weddings. Some weddings have a mechitza for dancing, and some weddings do not. I wouldn't think it would be much different than that issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm seeing a long question coming in. Oh, well, this one's coming from Canada, so it's pretty cool. We're all over North America. A group of women in our modern Orthodox shul have been asking for women's hakafot for many years. The last couple years, we were allowed access to the sanctuary for a women's-only hakafa after the main hakafot on the first night, which was lonely and poorly attended, taking women away from their families and the Suda. We're not getting anywhere. A number of women in our congregation, as well as the clergy, seem uncomfortable. What should we do?
So I think set up a meeting with the rabbi and explain what the feeling is. I think there needs to be more conversation of hearing each other. I think it's really important for each side to hear one another, hear each other's concerns, hear each other's desires. but the more there can be open dialogue with different constituencies and the clergy, I think that's where progress is made, in my view, is through those conversations.
Mm-hmm. And something that you mentioned in our telephone conversation was kind of the tone to take or not to take when approaching the rabbi with these things.
Right. I mentioned our conversation. I don't think it should come in adversarial. It should come in each person describing what they're looking for, and can we explore possibilities? As I suppose, assuming the rabbi is on the other side, if it can be created in an environment, can we work together on this to try to find a way that works best according to everybody's values and the nature of the community? I think you get more coming at it from that perspective, in my view.
Thanks.
Just a suggestion. I'm assuming that the reason why the women were put after the main hakafot were done was because people of the rabbinic leadership was not comfortable with women having hakafot of their own. I've seen in shuls that when the rabbi is not necessarily comfortable, they do it in a different space. It's not. I would not say that the women have to go downstairs to another room if there's a basement, not an ugly basement, but like a nice basement. But maybe it's about giving if it's not going to happen in the sanctuary, maybe there's a beit midrash that the women can do the programming, their hakafot at the same time as the regular program is happening, and just exploring different alternatives to that as well.
So simultaneous but separate.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. I'm going to start wrapping things up. So if each of you has a few minutes, would like to take a few minutes to express something new or to kind of summarize something you've said, a new insight, thought, wrap up, that would be super. Should I select one of you to go first, or do you want to jump in? Toby, you want to jump in?
Sure. I don't really have anything formal to say, other than I really enjoyed this conversation. I think some of your questions are similar to my questions, but I think as long as we just keep thinking of creative ways of getting women involved, children involved, just getting communities to really sort of, I think what Rabbi Starr said, just talk things through and help people sort of get to the place where they feel like they're having a meaningful experience on Simchat Torah is huge. So I hope that everyone who's listening has a wonderful Chag and a Shana Tova. And thank you for this great opportunity.
Thank you, Toby. Aliza, what about you?
I was just thinking about how at a wedding we're much more inclined to dance because there's the kala, the bride is just in the circle and we all want to dance with her. And on Simchat Torah we're like, oh, this is boring, or I'm not engaged, or this is not for me. It's a men's holiday, or this and that. I think we have to take a step back and think about how we view Simchat Torah. We are celebrating the Torah the same way we would celebrate a kala. And I think that we should push ourselves to find new enthusiasm for Simchat Torah and stop allowing ourselves to say, this isn't a holiday for me. But actually make it our holiday and put that energy in that we would like to see, because I think that will ultimately change the experience for all of us.
Thank you. Before we go to Adam, I just want to add, I just got a note that at Yakar in Israel, the women get to do hakafot in the main sanctuary. The men get to go somewhere else. Just FYI. All right, Adam. Sorry, Rabbi Starr.
That's fine. I actually want to, for my final thoughts, actually to think about the men for a moment. Because Aliza, what you said really spoke to me. The difference between people's excitement and participating in dancing at a wedding and what we see at Simchat Torah on both sides of the mechitza is very striking. And Torah tours is wonderful, and they bring such energy. But what I sometimes see happen is, oh, let the young people do the dancing. And there's really something that everybody, young and old, this is the Torah. We're celebrating the Torah. Kavod for the Torah is just like for the Chatan and Kala. We dance and we don't just sit on the side talking. We've seen, there are more people sitting on the side talking than there are dancing. And it's hard for people to let go, although I always say that at a sports game, everybody seems very comfortable getting really into it. And I think we need to work a little harder in our modern Orthodox rationalistic world to realize that there is a time to let loose, to be Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, to show that simcha, and most importantly, for our children to see that this is what brings us joy. And I think that's very powerful on both sides of the mechitza, that there are many issues that come up in Simchat Torah, but let's not forget that we each and every one of us has an obligation that we express and feel simcha, the great joy of having the Torah. She feels far away right now. I got a lot of sermons to write, but thank you for getting me in that mindset.
Yeah, thank you all for participating. Now it's Erev Rosh Hashanah. So thank you to all of the panelists and to everybody who has joined us from near and far. And near and far is relative to each of us also. But it's really been wonderful exploring this, and I look forward to increasing meaning everywhere, including where I am, the Simchat Torah, and every year. Thank you.
And
I forgot. Sorry. And also, as the JOFA program that this is, I also want to remind you to please follow JOFA, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, stay engaged, get on the mailing list, come to the conferences. Dinner is, I believe, November 15th. And just, stay tuned, because there are great publications all the time on different topics. And there are some wonderful ways and opportunities to get together, both virtually like this and in physical space also, and to keep learning and keep energizing our commitment and what we're able to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.